Hello, my name is Joe LaPlaca. I'm the Senior Director of the Cardi Gallery in London. I'm pleased to present Tempo e Memoria, an exhibition of the Italian artist Vincenzo Agnetti. Organized in close collaboration with the Archivio Vincenzo Agnetti, this marks the very first time a show is installed over Cardi Gallery's two spaces, in both London and Milan. With a selection of over 30 works from 1969 to 1975, Tempo e Memoria examines a crucial theme in Agnetti's linguistic research: time and memory. An artist, poet, writer, and performer, Agnetti was a central figure of Italian conceptual art and one of its most original critical voices. Over the course of a brief yet intensely productive career, from 1967 until his premature death in 1981, he explored our relationship to language. Words are at the heart of Agnetti's practice. He used them as a mode of expression and an artistic medium. Language appears in every form in his work, as poems, aphorisms, fragments of letters, and even spoken word performances.
Mio padre negli anni 50, diciamo così, ha fatto il liceo artistico a Brera e poi si è iscritto alla scuola di teatro. Voleva fare l'attore e era amante della poesia e ha lavorato per circa un anno e mezzo con Streller, facendo l'attor giovane. Sicuramente alla fine degli anni 50 c'erano delle avanguardie ed era molto amico di Manzoni e Castellani e insieme a loro aveva condiviso progetti, tante cose. Ma l'atmosfera era ancora molto provinciale. Poi le evenienze della vita, sono nata io, ho dovuto mantenere la famiglia, c'era un problema economico. Ha lasciato perdere il teatro e ha preso un diploma in elettrotecnica e ha incominciato a lavorare nel campo dell'automazione elettronica.
In 1962, dissatisfied with the contemporary art world he'd announced as the production of objects, Agnetti left it behind. He moved with his family to Argentina, favoring a life of simple work and reflection. He described this period as arte no, a refusal to paint, the gaining of awareness through low, dull work for true freedom.
Ma con la fine degli anni 60 Milano ha avuto un'esplosione importantissima di idee, di innovazioni, poi la politica, tutto sembrava possibile. Quindi un momento grandemente importante per la creatività, perché in un momento in cui tutto si pensa che possa essere ridefinito, è chiaro che l'arte trova un suo milieu ideale. Poi, quando lui torna nel 67 a Milano, si mette subito nella scena. Lui era convinto che l'arte era il modo migliore per dire delle cose, più ancora che la scrittura, che i saggi, che la critica, perché diceva gli oggetti sono dei rammentatori sintetici che giungono subito al cuore degli altri, al cuore e alla mente dell'osservatore. Non gli piaceva essere etichettato, pensava dell'artista che era finito il tempo della tavolozza dei colori e che quindi l'artista aveva a disposizione non tanto il giallo, il rosso e il blu, ma una serie di strumenti che sono la poesia, che sono la filosofia, che sono l'elettronica, che sono il comportamento per dire delle cose. E perché questo gli permise di fare un lavoro estremamente importante immediatamente, un primo lavoro che nasce già adulto, nonostante fosse quasi il primo lavoro in campo artistico, che è La macchina drogata.
1968 was a watershed year for international social and intellectual revolt. Agnetti created one of his most influential pieces that year, the macchina drogata. He modified an Olivetti calculator so the numbers corresponded to letters. Any attempt to use it led to a series of nonsensical words and characters, dictated by chance rather than logic. This Dadaist gesture is typical of Agnetti's playful and subversive approach to meaning, challenging our received notions of information and certainty. The work proposed a small yet powerful gesture of rebellion.
Lui diceva a proposito delle sue mostre: la mia intenzione è quello che se un visitatore viene a vedere le sue mostre subisca come una sorta di violenza in senso positivo, no? Un impatto forte che lo faccia pensare, e quando uscirà terrà la mia mostra come un elemento che, diciamo così, lo spinge a pensare oltre.
In 1971, at the Gallery Bleu in Milan, Agnetti exhibited his first works on felt, the feltri, which were to become the defining works of his practice. These works all follow a rigorous system, reducing language, color, and form to their most essential states. Always working in the same size and material, Agnetti painted and engraved these surfaces with words in English and in Italian. He presents us with poetic phrases, aphorisms, and expressions removed from any context. As a result, the meaning all depends on our reading. These can either be universal and definitive statements or open-ended lyrical passages that suggest a larger narrative. With Paesaggio, Agnetti pushes the descriptive powers of language by painting a landscape with words instead of images. Shortly after, Agnetti started breaking down language to even smaller components. All that is left here is syllables and fragments of letters that have lost any connection with the outside world. He called this series Almost Forgotten by Heart. According to the artist, words are useful because of the memory they hold. We communicate based on our past experience of the world. In these felts, language has lost its relationship to history. Words have disintegrated, becoming almost forgotten. All that is left is pure expression without meaning. Agnetti was fascinated by the erasure of language, its ever-changing nature. This, in his view, is the inevitable movement of history. We only ever perceive it in the past in incomplete fragments, and every culture adopts them by transforming them into something new. The natural extension of this idea is his book Forgotten by Heart. There are two versions of this work, one in London and one in Milan. One of his most iconic works, it embodies Agnetti's preoccupation with both time and memory. Books assimilate and share knowledge. Here, the book's pages have been hollowed out by the artist, a present and haunting absence. In place of where the words used to be is now a space for us to project our ideas, experiences, and desires. The phrase "forgetting by heart," first coined by the artist in the late 1960s, is a paradox. It alludes to the ways in which the past is ultimately forgotten. Culture, Agnetti tells us, is learning through forgetting. Agnetti worked in series throughout his career, called typologies. Tempus Mentis is an example of the meridiane, a reimagining of a traditional sundial. The sundial measures time and has a direct relationship with the physical world. It records the movement of the sun against a fixed numerical order. Here, however, there are no numbers. Agnetti juxtaposes the movement of nature with an abstract philosophical formulation. Time is conqueror of spaces. Like the macchina drogata, the instrument still functions, but the artist has altered its purpose. Alongside the meridians, Agnetti developed an important body of works throughout the 1970s entitled Axioms. As with the felts, the axioms are an extension of his conceptual research, combining both mathematical and verbal language. The axioms are an ingenious use of visual tropes of communication, like charts and graphs combined with philosophical propositions. With a series of metaphors, tautologies, and elliptical statements, Agnetti maps out how ideas and logical systems are formed and consolidated in the mind. Once again, the artist is interested above all in initiating a kind of conceptual and critical thinking in the viewer without offering conclusions. Agnetti had a long-standing appreciation for the theater. A keen student of acting and playwriting, for him, every artwork was a performance in one way or another, where the viewer would complete a story merely suggested by the artist. Beginning in the late 1960s, Agnetti developed several installation pieces based on this principle. He called them static theater because there are no characters, no movement. The action, in essence, is made up by the audience who interacts with the text and still images. In London, we've dedicated an entire floor to one of these experimental works, Elisabetta d'Inghilterra from 1975. Originally staged and performed during the 1976 Venice Biennale, the work focuses on a rich history of Elizabethan theater, offering a prescient meditation on the intersection of mass culture and institutional power. This exceptional display in London is the first ever reenactment of the piece since Agnetti unveiled it at the Biennale. For Agnetti, language is a vast resource. It is a repository for cultural memory, but it is also a way of grasping the world. While he was aligned with many movements like Arte Povera in the 1960s and 70s, his career is in many ways hybrid. Much like Agnetti's work, our exhibition spans different media, locations, and even languages. His approach to installation, based on audience interaction, helped define what conceptual art could be at the time. In the history of post-war Italian art, Agnetti's legacy remains unique.